meetings. The public may also participate by providing public comment in person. Public comments will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 to 25 participants in the queue have 2 minutes to speak. If time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1 minute to speak. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available through our AV team in the back of the council chambers. The city council regular meeting is called to order. Mayor Castriota is excused per the council rules. When the mayor is absent, the mayor pro tem presides over the meeting. A quorum of council is present. Will everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? And our flags are over here now.
That's right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their comments and communication to 2 minutes. We will plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We will begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, this agenda is approved. The only item under petitions and communications this evening is a proclamation declaring April 17th through 13th, 2025 as National Public Health Week. Will the representatives here to accept the proclamation please come and meet Councilmember Ward at the podium and introduce yourselves. Thank you for joining us this evening. I will summarize the proclamation and then I will turn it over to the representatives for comments. Each April for the past 30 years, communities nationwide have celebrated National Public Health Week, highlighting public health's role in building stronger and healthier communities. Broomfield's Department of Public Health and Environment protects and promotes community health by providing essential public health services, including emergency preparedness, access to physical and mental health care, disease prevention, environmental protection, and health promotion. Local public health services continue to evolve in response to population growth, changing community needs, technological advancements, and innovative partnerships. Broomfield's Public Health Department collaborates with city and county departments, local nonprofits, community partners, schools, child care centers, healthcare providers, and businesses to enhance the well-being of residents. National Public Health Week is a way to celebrate our collective efforts to make Broomfield a place where everyone can thrive and live a healthy life. Therefore, I hereby declare and proclaim April 17th through 13th as National Public Health Week in Broomfield. Would the representatives like to make any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. My name is Jason Malling, Director of Public Health and Environment for the City and County of Broomfield. First of all, I want to thank Council for issuing this proclamation and recognizing National Public Health Week. It's really important across the nation that we recognize that protecting our health is the efforts of all of our community members. It's not just one department that does this. And so we have the privilege of working closely with our other City and County of Broomfield departments, with our partners out in the community, and also with the residents to improve the health and well-being of Broomfield residents. More importantly, I want to just recognize the Broomfield Public Health and Environment team. We have a couple team members here with their kids in attendance, and we also have quite a few that are watching online. Throughout my 25 years in governmental public health, this is by far the most talented team I've ever worked with. They're smart, they're dedicated, they're passionate about serving Broomfield, and most importantly, they love working with each other. And to me, it makes it such a pleasure to come in and work with them on a daily basis and see how our efforts impact the overall residents of Broomfield. So I want to thank them and thank Council for this proclamation.
Excellent. We will now move to public comments for this item. If there is anyone who would like to be heard about this item specifically, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And seeing none, Comments and questions from council are next. Are there any comments or questions? Our screens are off, so if you'll just do it. Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
I just want to take a moment to thank you for all the work you do, because a lot of it goes sight unseen because you're doing your work job so well. But I know, since I work in healthcare right now, that we're probably going to learn a lot more about public healthcare in the years ahead, because we're going to learn what happens when we don't have good public health. I know I was on a call last week when they were talking about the loss of grants for vaccine clinics. And so we're going to have less distribution of vaccines in the next few years. We have the Secretary of Health and Human Services telling people to take vitamin A to treat measles. If you take vitamin A without doctor supervision, you can destroy your liver. So there's a whole bunch of misinformation. And unfortunately, I think it's going to fall upon you and for all of us to play a really big role in the next couple of years to battle misinformation about public health, encourage vaccines, encourage people to cooperate with public health to keep us all safe, particularly our children, especially those who can't be vaccinated, cancer patients, people with lupus, et cetera, who require the rest of us to do the right thing to help keep them safe and healthy. So I think you have a lot of busy years ahead, and I wish you well, and thank you that you're here.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I also want to thank the entire team. Our public health staff has just been under duress really ever since 2020. And you all have done so much work, and it's thoughtful. It's one of the leading parts of what our staff here is. It comes out of public health, and because you guys are actually reaching out to people who also who are most vulnerable. So people who are refugees, and you're really reaching people who might not have either a cultural understanding of vaccines and or just no background in understanding it. And I feel like there's a lot of good work that this is doing, and the Board of Health. I really want to say kudos to them and thank you so much for leading them through that. I just really want to tell your entire staff, please give them kudos because we see the work that you're doing in the community, and you guys are probably some of the most forward-thinking groups I've seen in a long time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I echo the same sentiment for my fellow council members as well. The work that you and your staff does for the city and county of Broomfield is phenomenal. And, it is important because, again, misinformation and the fact that we are in potentially another pandemic crisis with measles being outbreak over in Pueblo, we always have to make sure that our public services are available. So thank you so much for the work you do and for your staff being here and for the family members of staff being here as well.
Any other comments for this item? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here. And as you heard, thank the Board of Public Health, all of your staff for all of your tremendous work. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the comments.
All right, before we jump into council member reports, I wanted to announce that following the voter approval of Charter Amendment number 1E in the November 5th, 2024 election, the city and county of Broomfield will transition to publishing ordinances in full on the website effective today, April 8th, 2025. This new webpage titled City Council Ordinances is housed within the City Council website on broomfield.org. We will continue publishing all ordinances by title in the Broomfield Enterprise, along with information on where to find the full text online. Does any other member of council have any reports or updates this evening? Councilmember Lim.
Yesterday in Longmont, Councilmember Anderson and I attended the presentation of research based on Broomfield air quality monitoring data and a few other pad sites by CSU Dr. Collette and CU Dr. McKinsey, as sponsored by HEI Energy. The surprising findings in a few sentences include: there was an increase in the amount of VOCs during drilling in Broomfield due to the usage of synthetic drilling mud on the Livingston pad in order to avoid the odor that made residents sick with the usage of non-synthetic drilling mud at interchange. Also, the closed loop system during flowback resulted in decreased VOCs during typical flowback operations, but the VOC emissions for coiled tubing and mill-out operations right before flowback were substantial and previously overlooked in research. And last, the sea level noise that Broomfield residents experienced
is prevalent in all oil and gas operations everywhere and has health impacts of hypertension and stress. Even sea level noise during day impacts the ability to sleep at night. It was a very interesting research project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lim. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I gave my update about Dr. Cog previous board meeting last time, but I forgot to add one thing, and that is, as we all remember, the state Senate last year in SB 24-174 required that local governments create their own local housing needs assessments as per the regulations established by DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs. They did allow local governments to participate in a regional housing needs assessment in lieu of creating their own. Dr. Cog, prior to the passing of that bill, had ironically been working on its own regional housing needs assessment and submitted it for approval in December of 2024. In February, Dr. Cog received conditional approval from DOLA. They just had some small technical changes that do not preclude it from being used as a regional housing needs assessment. So for Broomfield, if we would like not to have to redo our housing needs assessment immediately and just wait, I think for the next 2 or 3 years, depending on when the last time we did our last local housing needs assessment, we will need to hold a public hearing and vote as a body to incorporate that regional housing needs assessment. And that starting time frame will look probably about sometime in July is when that 60-day window begins. April, just for staff's knowledge, I'm sure they already have this, but just in case, Dr. Cog will be hosting webinars for jurisdictional staff. And then May and June, they will also have office hours to provide materials and aid our staff in what that review process looks like. So I just wanted to let council, staff, and the community know that that is an option for us.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I serve on the E470 Toll Road Authority Board. And I was speaking with Joe Donahue, the executive director, recently, and we discussed the possibility of him coming to make a presentation before council because very few of us are really very familiar with the Toll Road Authority. I'm actually very impressed with their organization. And he offered to schedule, if there is interest, a tour of the headquarters facility. So I'll be following up with that in the near future.
Great, thank you. Any other council member reports? Seeing none, we will now continue with public comments. This is an opportunity for public to comment on matters other than items already listed elsewhere on this evening's agenda. If there is anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Kim Tuisini-Pansai from The Outlook. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council and staff. And I thought you might enjoy hearing some good news for once. I'm here to talk about Broomfield High School's after prom party, known as familiarly as JAM or Just After Midnight. And throughout the year, hundreds of parents and community members get together to help create murals, props, prizes, games, food, everything for the kids to transform the high school into a new world and have the kids stay for 4 to 5 hours after prom under adult supervision. And all juniors and seniors and their dates are invited, whether they go to prom or not. And so it's been going on for 35 years now and has kept hundreds of kids safe during all that time. I personally have been involved for 20 years as a specialty painter. And so JAM is going to be April 26th this year. And you're all invited to the public open house. The whole community is invited. While the kids are at prom, we open the doors from 7 to 9 p.m. at Broomfield High School, and you get to walk through it and see the miracle that is JAM. It's always really amazing and really fun. And there are so many people involved in this. And so I did bring some flyers. If you guys would each like a copy of a flyer with a date, I'm happy to pass them out. Otherwise, I just want to say this is an example of, certainly we are living in challenging times. But this is one where everybody comes together and does great things for our kids. So thank you. Would you guys like the flyer?
Thanks, Kim. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandy Anderson from the Broadlands. Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and city leadership staff. As usual, I'd like to thank you for all you do, as it's well beyond what is understood, acknowledged, and you all deserve our respect and support. I say this even when mistakes are made, whether knowingly or just contributory with rose-colored glasses or happy thinking, which is what I assume most of our missed maintenance for water and sewer was. And when accountability and fairness are questionable. On March 25th, I believe 5 of you made a mistake for voting for censuring a council member. I expressed concern prior to the vote that the censure process proposed seemed unfair and not equally applied. I even provided a couple of concerns and existing examples where the inequity was evident in my public statement. As 5 of you voted for censure, I've addressed a letter to each of you outlining the requirements of an additional censure using the exact same reasons as stated by Mayor Pro Tem on March 25th. I've provided you the proof points in each of those categories, and I believe that the indictments of one CM should also be made on another CM for breaking those exact same rules. I hold each of you accountable for that action taken and then the fairness and equity required now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments tonight? Please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood, and you have 3 minutes.
I am Will Freeman. I'm a resident of Ward 2. You may have noticed a bunch of black cameras mounted on poles around town. These are automated license plate readers. These cameras log and analyze every vehicle that passes by, not just criminals, but all of us all day long. Over time, these cameras can be used to build a detailed picture of our routines when we leave for work, where we go, even who we drive with, using a feature called convoy analysis. All this is happening without your knowledge and consent. Luckily, Broomfield only leases 2 of these cameras, but apparently any company with enough money can pay the city to get permission to install them on our public roadways. That's exactly what happened in the Interlochen district, where the Interlochen Owners Association, a private business group, installed 14 of these cameras on our public roads instead of their own property. When applying for the permit, the association claimed that only the local police department would have access to this data. Lost my point. Oh yeah, okay. While Broomfield PD can access this data, the data is actually owned by the association. That means the association and potentially thousands of other flock customers across the country can access real-time data about where we are and where we've been. And that's not just speculation, it's how the system is designed. This project was pitched to the city council as a crime deterrent, but even the association admitted in a recent email to me that there's no proof it reduces crime. The benefits of ALPRs are often overstated, while the risks are rarely not acknowledged. Unlike traditional searches, accessing this data doesn't require a warrant, probable cause, or even reasonable suspicion, bypassing Fourth Amendment protections. These agencies can look up anyone, anytime, for any reason. And we've already seen abuses, officers using ALPRs to stalk exes and share data illegally across jurisdictions. This kind of unchecked access is a serious threat to our civil liberties. Given the promised benefits are shaky at best, it's worth asking why we're allowing this kind of surveillance in the first place, and why we're even involved in letting a private company monitor us on public roads. How does this serve the people of Broomfield? The permit they were given is a revocable permit, which means you, the council, have full authority to revoke it at any time. I urge you to use that authority and revoke the permit. Thank you.
Ready?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Council, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Donna Moody. I live in Anthem Highlands, and I'm here tonight to talk to you on behalf of a growing number of community members who are concerned about road racing. I wanted to acknowledge our Ward 4 Council Member Anderson's efforts on this on behalf of this issue, as well as Council Members Hinkle and Cohen for reaching out to me as well and offering to help alongside their own efforts. As you probably know, road racing is ongoing and pervasive in our area and metro areas around the state. We're particularly problematic here because we're multi-jurisdictional. And I think that multi-agency road racing coalition that was put together was intended to help with this issue coordination and as another way to report. That agency supposedly monitors social media, and there's a lot of information on social media, including the racers, their names, and their locations. So I just provided a handout just to give you an idea of what you can find on social media. Residents call the non-emergency number often. I can attest to that. And we call them real time. So there's no reason to guess where the racing is happening. But despite these efforts, it seems to be exploding and getting more and more dangerous, as does the frustration out there. There's a lot of misinformation about road racing. The other handout I brought was with respect to a couple of applicable statutes. One defines speed exhibitions as squealing tires, rapid acceleration, smoke from tire slippage. I don't even know what that stuff is, but they do. That same Title 42 is more clear, and it makes it illegal to modify your exhaust system so that the noise that's emitted is more than the noise emitted under the original muffler. So that's pretty clear as well. But I just want to mention, and I didn't plan to, but mention that Senate Bill 217 that passed in 2020, and it was fully implemented in 2023, is having a significant impact on your ability to enforce. Just briefly, it's very complicated. It significantly increases reporting in all cases of police contact, all cases. The report must include perceived or observed demographic information for every stop. It also eliminates some of the qualified immunity, I think that's what they call it, for the officers. So it puts everybody in a position where it is extremely difficult to enforce the areas of statute that are more clear. So that's what I wanted to say to you. I would also like to volunteer as a community member to work together with you to find solutions to this problem. I don't think you can point to one thing and say, you know, that's what we need to fix, but that's what I wanted to convey.
Excellent. Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Next.
Quentin Salyer, Ward 4. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but with the conversation of flock cameras, I felt like I needed to come up because this weekend I'm actually presenting to you as congressional leadership on this topic and why they're important in the community. So number one, I wanted to outline a few things that the city member brought up. Flock technology is not used for facial recognition at any law enforcement agency. It does not collect biometric or sensitive information and is not used for anything that is illegal in Colorado that's legal in other states, such as abortion, things like that. Also, every department that uses these cameras has to, in the Flock system, create a transparency portal that states exactly what they use the cameras for, how long they retain the data, which is 30 days, which is industry standard, and what hot lists they're alerted on. So when a private company uses these, like a Vista Hospital in Louisville, they're contracting to the Louisville Police Department for hot lists and also to help solve crimes. Only cars that are on these hot lists are recorded for data, and that data is deleted in 30 days if law enforcement does not decide to follow up. Also, let me find it here. You have to have specific reasons to use these flock cameras, a law enforcement reason that's audited every 30 days by a department member that's appointed to do so, such as a public information officer. These hot lists include the National Crime Information Center, the Colorado Crime Information Center, Amber Alert hot lists, and also custom department hot lists. Such in Louisville, I could bring you posters, I had tons, where through the Marshall Fire, they started to put these in to monitor areas. They arrested one person using the flock cameras that decreased construction crime by 64%. So these aren't an infringement on the Fourth Amendment. There's a lot of research to state, in my opinion, that that's very true, because you have to have a law enforcement reason to use this. You can't simply type in a license plate and look up someone like myself. When I was in the Louisville Police Department, we did that, and you have to have a case number, a legal reason to use this system, not just, hey, I wonder where this person's been. So 30 days retention, law enforcement reason. Flock cameras are great for the community. And if you're ever concerned about potential wrongdoings, like I said, every police department uses a transparency portal. It's found on Flock's website. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comments. Any other comments tonight? Please state your name, neighborhood, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, Kathy Knight, Ward 4, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council staff. First public comment off the top of my head. Let's see how it goes. These are interesting times, and I would just encourage everybody to treat each other with kindness and respect and patience and grace. We're all just doing our best. Would love to just again encourage everybody to treat each other with kindness and dignity and respect and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to reports. Staff is going to provide council with a legislative update. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And Danae Brouillard is making her way down. She is our Director of Strategic Initiatives and Governmental Affairs. Lots happening. Ms. Brouillard.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf, and council members. Danae Brouillard, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Governmental Affairs. And I just got locked out of my computer, so we're going to go old school with my notes and see how much I have in my head this evening. So with kind and grace as I present this. Next slide. Thank you, James. So tonight's presentation will focus on a couple of things. We'll give an update on the legislative session, as Manager Hoffman just mentioned. It's been busy, and the long bill is slowly making its way through the process, which has been interesting to say the least. We'll talk quickly about our bill tracker and the status updates on the bills that council has already taken positions on. And then we'll talk about some other bills and topics of interest. Primarily, there is one bill, it's Senate Bill 1, which is the Colorado Voting Rights Act bill. The staff will be making a recommendation to council tonight for a position at the end of the presentation. Before I dive into the information, I did want to mention, consistent with our past updates, we did update this presentation this evening to be the most timely information that we could have. So the presentation folder for the residents and for council has been updated with this updated presentation as well. Next slide. All right, so to date, we're about 3/4 of the way through the session. I think today is day 92 of 120, and over 600 bills have been introduced. It's fascinating because when we gave this presentation a month ago, we were barely at 400 and everybody thought, wow, we're gonna have a low session of bills. And then the long bill came with the orbital bills, and that itself was about 64 bills in itself. So we are quickly getting back up to the number that we've seen the past 2 sessions. The big things that are happening right now is the state budget. So we've been talking about the state budget deficit estimated to be $1.2 billion, I think since about October and November last year. We're starting to actually see things come together. Still too early to know where we're going to be in a month, but things are starting to move. So you can see on the screen here, so the long bill is the state budget. The state budget runs from July 1 to June 30th every year. So we're looking at the FY25, FY26 budget. It was introduced on March 31st, so last Monday. That was a week later than their deadlines that they're supposed to introduce. It did take the Joint Budget Committee, or the JBC, additional time to put that budget together with the deficit and the challenges that they are facing. Since it's been introduced in the 8 days, it has already passed the first chamber and is in the second chamber right now, which is the House. They are starting they're going to convene the second reading tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So if you've been following legislation, that's early for them. They typically start at 9, and we anticipate that to go all day long tomorrow and them to get through second reading. We're hoping for third reading on Wednesday, and then it will go to conference committee to reconcile the differences between the Senate and the House. So that's where we are on the long bill. As I mentioned, it's very large. There's 64 bills total. The orbital bills, which always seem confusing, essentially that's where you see the reduction, right? So in the long bill, you see the credits and where the revenue and the money are. The orbital bills are where you're removing the program so that you have that funding to provide the revenue needed for the budget. In regards to changes, typically we do see some changes around dollar amounts in the long bill. We're not anticipating seeing that this year, or that the Joint Budget Committee is interested in seeing that. Instead, what we're seeing are a lot of footnotes. Footnotes are an opportunity for people to give direction to state departments for maybe a future project or a report or something for them to do in the interim, but we're not seeing a lot of changes around the actual number amounts that are in the long bill. Next slide. All right, so one thing we did want to talk about, I know many of you have heard about it in your different membership groups, but there is the House Joint Resolution 25-1023, which is the require the General Assembly Tabor constitutionality lawsuit. And so we just wanted to take a moment and talk about this. It kind of has come in parallel to the budget deficit question, as Tabor, the question of Tabor and its functionality is obviously more prevalent in a time when we have a budget deficit. I did want to highlight, it is a joint resolution. So you'll see in the title, it looks a little different. So it's not a bill. And what that means is that it's an expression of the will of both chambers. So this is both chambers saying they have a desire to have the state retain legal counsel to sue the state to see if Tabor is constitutional. So that's what this resolution will do. It does not have to go to the governor for approval. So again, it's the act of the legislature to say, this is something that we agree together and that we would like to do. Some background, so Tabor, which is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, was originally passed back in 1992 by the voters. It has been amended one time with referendum C, I think that was like in 2004, 2005. But really it does two primary things. So if this were to pass, it restricts the General Assembly from raising taxes without seeking voter approval. And it also limits how much money the state budget can grow annually. So those are the two key components of Tabor. If the resolution was to pass, the next step would be to go to the courts to determine if the General Assembly has legal standing for that case. And then if it passes through that, then the courts will determine if it's constitutional or not. So there's a lot after this process if it does pass. I will say the sponsorship list on both the House and Senate side is long. And I will note that both Senator Winter and Representative Lindstedt are listed as sponsors of the resolution. Right now, in regards to our membership organizations, CCAT has taken a support position and CML is in an amend position. Our other groups have not taken a position as of, I believe when I checked at 5 o'clock. So I think this is where we're still standing. Next slide. So a couple things for Broomfield. So as you all know, the City and County of Broomfield is de-Bruced, which means we get to retain and spend all revenue that we collect under our existing tax rates. If the resolution was to pass and the courts found Tabor to be unconstitutional, it is really hard to quantify the impact to CCOB because it would be the state Tabor that they're keeping. There is some speculation or ideas that if the state has more money, then less unfunded mandates would be passed down to counties, for example. There could be more money for grants, but it's impossible to determine what the actual impact would be if this were to go all the way through being passed as a resolution and the courts finding it as unconstitutional. So based on that, the direction from council was to bring recommendations forward when a bill impacts CCOB directly. And since we don't know what that direct impact would be, staff is not making a recommendation tonight on a position. However, we did mention it in the presentation. I know many of you are talking about it in your groups. If council did desire to take a position this evening, you could do that following your rules and procedures. Next slide. All right, so just a reminder for everyone's awareness, the Broomfield bill tracker continues to be updated. As bills have died or been postponed indefinitely, we continue to update it. And as bills continue to be introduced, it's the most real-time update that you can get of the bills moving through the session. Next slide. All right, so just a quick update on bills that council has taken formal positions on. The first one is House Bill 25-1056, local government permitting wireless telecom facilities. Council's in an opposed position, and thank you to the council members that have helped testify on that position. It has passed both chambers. It's in conference committee tomorrow. We were able to get some amendments working with CML to clarify when the shot clock starts and to extend the time frame. But unfortunately, it's still an unfunded mandate and it takes away local decision making. And we anticipate that it will pass conference committee tomorrow without changes. The next bill is 1169, Housing Developments on Faith and Educational Land, or YIGB. Thank you again to the council members and I think Councilmember Hinkle and Mayor Castriota for testifying. That one has passed the first chamber and has been laid over in the Senate on second reading for the last 2 weeks. That one does have some problems that it's running into. So we'll continue to monitor and advocate on behalf of council's opposed position. The next one is 1272 construction defects in middle market housing. That one is continuing to move. It got through its first hurdle and through the first chamber. It's scheduled for next week in local government and housing in the Senate. So we'll look at that schedule and reach out if testimony is needed. The next one is 1096, automated permits for clean energy technology. If council recalls, we were in an opposed position on that bill because it mandated local governments to use an automated solar permitting software. We were really grateful to get the mandate removed in partnership large by CC4CA. So we did move into a monitor position. The reason we didn't go to support is there's rumors that they want to bring that back in the second chamber, that the mandate where we have to do it instead of making it optional to use the solar technology permitting. So we are actively just continuing to monitor in that monitor position. The next one is 161 transit reform. This one actually has been sitting in appropriations for a very long time. It hasn't moved at all. And it's because I think the fiscal note on it is like $180,000. And so it's sitting there until the long bill gets through. At that point, the caucus will have to decide priorities related to funding and whether or not it moves. So we've shared the amendments with Senator Winter and we'll continue to monitor. And then last but not least is Senate Bill 30, which was increased transportation mode choice, reduce emissions. Council's in a support position there. And that one is also parked in appropriations, but it does not have a fiscal note. So we anticipate that one will move quickly once the long bill has kind of taken its way. All right, next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the last part of this presentation is staff does have a recommendation tonight for council's consideration. If council does not want to take a position on this bill tonight, then no action is needed. We've talked about this bill actually at every update. We just have stayed in a monitor position. It's Senate Bill 25-1, which is the Colorado Voting Rights Act, and it looks at civil action process for remedying violations. I know if you're involved in CML at all, they have been talking actively about this bill. There's a lot of concerns, I would say, from a city perspective and being able to run fair, equitable elections with access. And so it's something Broomfield remains committed to. It's past the first chamber. And so what we're asking tonight is to move into an amend position so that staff can work more with the Colorado Municipal League to push for some amendments related to due process and let's see, I think I have a note here. Burden of proof standards, as well as the claim elements and process. So those would be the two amendments. It's language that the City Municipal League has already floated that we would want to support if council chooses to move into that amend position this evening. And with that, that concludes the staff report.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your report. Next, we move on to public comments on this agenda item. If there is anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and to this item only. See no comments. Questions and comments from council are next. Are there any questions or comments from my council colleagues? Councilmember Marsh Holshan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Ms. Billiard, on the Senate Bill 1, one of the conversations in CML Executive Board was the issue related to how it impacts our election, specifically our ward, the way we draw our wards. And the conversation we had was that it might impact, it wouldn't allow, potential to not allow us to draw wards simply by population. We'd have to take, different factors, make sure non-discriminatory type of factors into it. Has that been amended out of it, or is that still a concern?
Yeah, thank you, Council Marshallson. My understanding is that was amended in the first chamber. The Secretary of State provided, it was almost a pre-amend or strike below that happened. So my understanding is that has been removed, but I will confirm. And if that's not the case, we'll follow up with council.
That's all.
Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor Tim. I just wanted to really briefly note in terms of the Tabor bill, which though I don't expect it to pass or be successful, put in context, Tabor, if we didn't have Tabor, we wouldn't have a $2 billion deficit. We'd have a $2 billion surplus. And what does that mean? It means Colorado, in terms of transportation funding, education funding, is always around 40 to 47th in ranking among other nations, other states, pardon me. And the rankings are even worse. It's 49th for the rate of teacher wage competitiveness, 45 in taxable resources spent on education K through 12, 49th in terms of number of novice teachers in the classroom, which means we aren't building up our teacher ranks for future years. In transportation, our roads are ranked 42nd, 45th in terms of road conditions. So we all pay the price of Tabor and not paying what other states are investing into their roads and in their education. And this is particularly notable locally in terms of Adams 12 having to cut well over 100 positions because of their current financial condition, which is going to have an impact on our kids. So be lovely if they succeed, but I don't have high expectations, but I just wanted to put that in context. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The $1 million question is, why is this constitutionality being asked now? Tabor's been the law of the land for over 30 years, and why didn't anyone do this beforehand?
Conversation. And I think there's lots of guesses why. As you mentioned, it's been around since 1992. There was one attempt to override Tabor, and the legal standing for the claimants was not there. So they were not successful in getting to that next step. As I mentioned, first step will be, does the General Assembly have the legal standing if the resolution passes? And so it never made it past that round. I think to Councilmember Cohen's point, I think the $1.2 billion budget deficit and then the current makeup of parties in the legislature has provided a different opportunity than maybe we've seen historically.
That's a great answer. And again, this is something that I'm sure many folks at the Capitol are thinking right now and seeing what could happen. And I'm sure the Supreme Court for Colorado would be very much interested in deciding to favor Tabor. So thank you.
Councilmember Henkel.
Mike, thank you. Sorry, I can't find my mic sometimes. Thanks, Danae, for this. Thanks for doing this off the top of your head. What a whiz you are. You are very adept at what you do, and I just really appreciate all your work. I think a lot of times people don't understand what it's like to follow bills and how confusing it can be. There was even an amendment. I would, just so the council knows, I would like to move later on that council does take a support motion on this joint resolution 1025. I've had many people come up to me and say, you know, Tabor is our issue in our, especially in our school systems. So I think that they would like to particularly see their local council members support something like this. The second thing is that I was texting with Representative Garcia after it passed on Monday, late at night, like they went really late. And it seemed like there was an amendment to the bill or to the joint resolution. I got to watch my language on that one. But to it where you're adding an amendment on there that they will hope to take it off on the floor. Is there any sort of sight on what that amendment is? Because it seems like Representative Garcia was not very happy about what the amendment was. And it seemed like what they wanted to do was just exclude anyone who was named as plaintiffs or whatnot in the previous lawsuit, remove their capability to engage on this one. What was the amendment? Can you speak to it? And then is there an opportunity for it to be removed on the floor?
Thank you, Councilmember Hinkle. So as Councilmember Hinkle just mentioned, it was heard yesterday. It passed after many long hours of discussion. I believe it was 7-6 on party lines with one Democrat going on the opposed side. So it was a long conversation, and you're seeing divisions among political parties. In regards to the amendment, we looked at it today. I need to spend more time understanding what it is. There's always the possibility that they can amend it again on the floor, but more to come. We'll put it in our Friday email update. And I'm hoping that tomorrow as well from our Senator Winter and Representative Lindstedt, we can get some additional information as well as to what the actual intent of that language was.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we could still support it and just sort of note to the bill sponsors that we would like that removed eventually. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just have a couple questions about two bills. I'm going to start off with SB 25-1, the voting rights bill. Ms. Brouillard, you mentioned that there were some issues around due process and a few other things that you mentioned. Can you elaborate a little more as to what you mean by that and how it relates to a local government? Because I'm not steeped in this bill,
Sure.
and so I'm not all that familiar with what you mean and how it applies to us.
That's a fair question. Thank you, Councilmember Ward. And thank goodness for printers and paper still every once in a while to refer back to. So the two amendments that CML has outlined, the first was burden of proof standards. And so the new bill language, it sets different standards for the plaintiff, the burden of proof for plaintiffs versus defendants. So the hope is to make that more similar so that city and county, those running elections have more fair footing in having the same proof of burden to demonstrate as the defendant, the plaintiff. I'm
Okay.
mixing my terms up.
So I guess another way of putting it is that as it stands right now, if, let's say, a resident or some other organization in Broomfield wanted to, let's say, sue us because of our ward boundaries are creating, let's say, a racial disparity in one particular ward, but not another, we would have a much higher burden of proof in which to refute that that was not either the cause or that's not actually the case, et cetera.
Correct. So the concern is that the differing standards for burden of proof will make it easier for the plaintiff to bring a claim against us, but impossible for us to defend it.
Okay. And then you said there was another amendment from CML, correct?
Yeah, the second one is claim elements and process. And this one ties back to the federal law and the Federal Voting Rights Act, which is what is currently being followed. And this one is a little bit more complicated. So I'll just read what is in here. So it's related to vote dilution claims. So right now there's 3 proof of elements that you have to demonstrate. And this has some different definitions and language that are not consistent with the federal law. And so the goal is to get consistency between the current federal law and the Federal Voting Rights Act and this bill language.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head what those inconsistencies exactly are?
Yep. So the three elements are size and compactness of the racial group. Let's see. Okay, let me go down here actually. So disparately impairing to creating a material disparity in and compared to other eligible electors is one where there's a difference. Change disparately impairs to reflects a material disparity in and as compared, oh, that's a repeat of eligible electors. So that's in two sections of the bill. And then requiring consistency with federal factors. So those three elements. And then last but not least, it talks about the recommended remedy and how the facts that you have to show and the data.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I guess then my follow-up question for that is when with the way the bill is written, if it were to pass as is, when we look at, let's say, a racial minority group, are they looking at registered electors or is it just straight population? Because I guess one of my concerns is, so like in Ward 2, for example, I have a lot of renters who either have green cards or are not permanent citizens yet, so they don't have the ability to vote. And I wonder how that would impact that calculation of the racial minority group in this particular instance.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to look at City and County Attorney Rogers. We have a really great, Pat Gilbert did a really great report that makes us more in Broomfield language that I cannot access. I don't know, City and County Attorney Rogers, do you happen to have that?
Thank you, Ms. Brouillard. And Councilmember Ward, I have the bill pulled up right now, and it doesn't appear to be specific to registered voters. It looks like the data sets are Census Bureau data that can be collected statewide at the district and county level. So it would cover people who aren't registered.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question goes to the House Joint Resolution. My understanding is that the legislature wants to challenge the standing Tabor because of a provision in the US Constitution, which is Article 4, Section 4, that states Congress shall guarantee all states a Republican form of government, with a Republican form of government meaning you elect people to make decisions on your behalf, i.e. laws, and taxes really are a form of laws. If that is the case, and let's say the state is successful in overturning Tabor, would that then open up the possibility for, let's say, local governments that in their charters have restrictions on tax increases have to be approved by the voters? Would that then extend potentially to a local government being able to challenge under that same principle, since in the eyes of the US Constitution, local governments are basically just entities of the state?
I'll jump in on that question. I think that's a law school final exam that you could write about. I mean, because it does address this issue of a representative form of government, and it depends on the writing of the charter. I mean, we have home rule authority in our state constitution as well. So I think that's a really very complicated question. I would say that I think if the state is successful in this Tabor lawsuit, that it wouldn't be automatic that we would then have that ruling would be applied to local governments and home rule authorities.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Well, it sounds like you have a good prompt for your final paper.
No, I don't want to take on that final prompt right now. I have other things in law school to deal with as it stands. But Mayor Pro Tem, I will make, I know staff had asked for consideration for SB 2501. So I'm happy to make the motion that we have an amend position for the bill.
Excellent. Councilmember Ward has made a motion for council to take a amended position on bill numbers, Senate Bill 25-001. Is there a second? And we have a second from Councilmember Anderson. Is there any discussion on this bill? Or any discussion on this motion? Seeing no discussion, council, please cast your vote on this motion electronically. And all council members have entered their vote. A 2/3 majority of the entire council, not just those present, is required for council to take a direction, formal position on the bill. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Is there another motion? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to support, and I believe I have this right because it's not in front of me, but House Joint Resolution 1025 for the Tabor bill and support.
I believe it's 1023, is that correct?
1023.
1023.
That's my problem with my memory.
No worries. Councilmember Henkel has made a motion to take a support position on the House Joint Resolution 25-1023. Is there a second? Councilmember Marshall.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Henkel.
Oh, sorry, that was my motion.
No worries. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I agree with the statements that have been made earlier, specifically Councilmember Cohen's statements. We have a $1.2 billion state budget deficit this year, but we gave back $8 billion in Tabor refunds over the last 3 years. We are one of the last in spending in education and transportation and transit. There's a lot of things that we could be doing. I did the math, 8 million, based on the population of Colorado, $8 billion it's about $445 per person per year. I can guarantee you I probably spent more on tires over that time period than I would have gotten my Tabor refunds because of potholes, et cetera, public transportation, pollution, everything. This state has a funding problem, and the problem is Tabor. I do support this. I think this is a good thing. I don't have any confidence that the United States Supreme Court would ever uphold this lawsuit, but doesn't hurt to try. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
I may have a slightly different take on this one, and also I haven't delved as deep as some others, but I want to just consider the fact that this was a voter-approved measure, had the majority support. So I really think we just stay out of this discussion and let the state do what they will. And also, not sure if this really plays into it, but we're gonna be paying both sides of this lawsuit, because it's not just the General Assembly requiring the lawsuit, but it's also our Attorney General being required to defend the lawsuit. So there's a significant cost that comes with it and no guarantees. So I will just let the state do as they will. So that would be my no vote, which you'll see shortly.
Any other comments, discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion, we have a second. Council members, please cast your vote electronically. And all council members have entered their vote. A 2/3 majority of the entire council, not just those present, is required for council to direct a formal position on the bill. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that motion passes 9-1. That completes our discussion on the legislation, unless there are any other comments or questions from my council colleagues. Thank you very much for the report. We will now continue with report section of the agenda. City Manager Hoffman, do you have any reports for tonight?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Rogers, any reports?
No, thank you.
Excellent. Council's consideration of the consent items is next. The clerk will read all the consent items by title, and there will be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 6A through 6E by title?
6A, approval of minutes for the regular council meeting of March 25th, 2025. 6B, proposed resolution number 2025-63, approving issuance of a purchase order to Interior Environments for the Norman Smith Service Center remodel project, Phase 2 furniture purchase. 6C, proposed resolution number 2025-65, approving the design build agreement by and between the city and county of Broomfield and A to Z Recreation LLC for the Paul Durda Recreation Center Early Learning Playground Replacement Project. 6D, proposed resolution number 2025-62, approving a trash, rubbish, and garbage hauling license for Fusion Field Services LLC. 6E, request for executive session seeking legal advice related to local land use control and state legislation.
We will now proceed with public comments. If there is anyone who would like to be heard on the consent items, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no one, does any member of council have any comments on these agenda items? Councilmember Lim.
In the context of discontinuing the call-in services for residents during the council meeting, council was told that staff continues to scrub the 2025 budget and is also kicking off the 2026 budget process, looking at a list of budgeted items to be removed from future budgets. So in looking at items B and C on the consent agenda, item B, phase 1 furniture, we had already approved 194,000. And now we're being asked to approve 296,000 for phase 2 furniture for the Norman Smith Service Center. And item C is 300,000 for the PDRC playground equipment. So I'd just like to hear staff's comments if those items that were asked that are sizable on the consent agenda were examined as part of that continuing to scrub the 2025 budget.
I'm going to ask Brian Graham to come down and he can speak to the Norman Smith Service Center budget and as well as the PDRC. Also Clay Shuck, Director of Rec Services, is here and can provide that explanation. Councilmember Lim, to start the conversation before we dig in, everything is being scrubbed. So there isn't one item that we are requesting that hasn't gone through that filter. I think under the consideration of the call-in, staff continues to look at what resources, and I don't mean financial resources, I mean resources that we can capitalize on, as in Zoom or by appointment. So again, it's scrubbing those items. It's how we do business. We're not doing it topic by topic. Mr. Graham.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, City Management. My name is Brian Graham. I'm the Capital Improvement Program Manager in Community Development. I can't speak to specifics about the budget scrubbing, but I can speak to these 2 projects specifically. In the case of the Norman Smith project, that is our service center is built in the 90s and is undergoing a major renovation currently. That's been approved, several consecutive years in the budget, most recently in October for the 2025 budget. So we are in budget. Previously, as you'll note in the council memo, there was a purchase order issued for the phase 1 furniture in January. This has always been anticipated to be about $500,000 worth of furniture need. That initial purchase order was a little less than 200,000. And what's before you tonight is a resolution to authorize the city manager to sign a purchase order for the second part of that purchase. The furniture is being phased according to the phase of construction. So it is a building in which our staff are actively working out of. And so we've kind of shifted everybody to one side of the building and upstairs so we can work on phase 1. And then this furniture purchase will be for phase 2. So we'll move folks back into the phase 1 area so we can do the renovations in the second part of the building. Does that answer your question about the furniture? And the PDRC early learning playground is the playground you see just to the left outside of the PDRC as you're approaching the main entrance. It is beyond its usable or age. And so this project will design and build a replacement of that playground to bring it up to our current standards and make sure that that continues to be a safe facility for our early learning center and childcare, and will be mostly targeted for children ages 5 and under. Absolutely.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Clay Shuck, Director of Operations. Just to add a little bit to what Brian was talking about with the playground at PDRC, since it is a licensed childcare area, we are required to maintain that playground. It is at its end of life cycle. Our last couple of inspections have identified that as an issue through the state of Colorado. So we do need to upgrade this playground as a mandate to continue to do licensed childcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. To piggyback off of what Mr. Shuck just said, can you elaborate a little more as to what qualifies as end of life? Obviously, I know you said there was something about, not something, but we are a licensed childcare provider, so there are certain state regulations that follow with that. But can you elaborate a little more as to what does end of life mean? Are we seeing structural integrity issues? Are we seeing capacity issues? Are we seeing anything else? Can you just elaborate a little more on that for the residents?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Ward. A lot of times when we talk about end of life, we're talking about the play equipment that we have currently is so out of date that we're having a hard time replacing it, getting parts to do replacements or fix current equipment that gets fixed or that gets broken. And we've got a surface area that has to be redone. And so again, that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about end of life cycle for that particular playground.
Okay, great. Thanks for that elaboration.
You're welcome.
As it relates to Councilmember Lynn's question about the Norman Service Center, with this purchase order for new office equipment, is that just a one-for-one replacement of equipment that currently exists, or are we also increasing the number of stations because we have increased staffing at that facility?
I believe it's a combination, and I apologize. I've not been involved in this project from the start, and our project manager, who had been managing this up until about 10 days ago, is no longer with Broomfield. So I'm catching up a bit. I believe this is, obviously it's a replacement, but we're also adding some conference room space as well as kind of more modern touchdown stations. So this facility has staff that work in both our facilities and parks groups that are most frequently in the field, but still need a touchdown station or place to check email, create reports, do training and things like that. So that, I believe, is a feature that's not currently at the facility.
Okay, great. Thank you for that elaboration.
Thank you.
Any other council member questions? Seeing none, before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 6E is a request for an executive session, which requires 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that consent items 6A through 6E be approved? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Wynn?
I second this motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. First under action items this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration of second reading of a proposed ordinance related to the rezoning of property 11961 Quay Street. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of this agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and Brandon Rowe, our principal planner, is going to walk us through this item. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. Again, Brandon Rowe, Planning Manager. Next slide, please. The proposal this evening is for the second reading of ordinance number 2264 related to the rezoning of the property located at 11961 Quay Street. That rezoning would rezone from commercial C1J to general industrial I2. Staff did present a full presentation on this proposal as part of the March 25th public hearing. Nothing has changed between the first and second reading, and as such, staff is providing a very brief presentation this evening and is happy to answer any questions. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for your concise presentation. We will now proceed with public comments. If there is anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no public comments. Next is questions from council. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions? Seeing none. The public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2264. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2264, rezoning 11961 Quay Street from commercial C1J to general industrial I2.
Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on second and final reading in order published by title? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we will move to the vote on ordinance number 2264. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that passes unanimously. Next, under action items is the public hearing and council's consideration on second reading of two proposed ordinances relating to marijuana operations and cultivation and manufacturing. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Mr. Rowe's just going to stay at that podium this evening and walk us through this item as well. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Again, Brandon Rowe, Planning Manager. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. This item is a little bit longer than the last one, but not much longer. I have two ordinances related to marijuana that are being presented on second reading this evening. Could you get the next slide? Thank you. So the first ordinance is ordinance number, helps if I don't close my notes. Ordinance number 2266, which proposes to amend Title 17 of zoning of the Broomfield Municipal Code to make permanent the prohibition of marijuana cultivation and marijuana product manufacturing uses. There was an existing prohibition that was in the code that was a time-sensitive one that sunset on April 1st, 2025. At the last meeting, which was March 25th, the City Council approved a temporary moratorium to help fill the gap. This ordinance, if approved on second reading this evening, would replace that prohibition and would remain in place until City Council at a future date were to take action to remove it if they so desired. It would also update section 1702 to recognize that retail marijuana businesses are an approved use subject to licensing in the city and county of Broomfield. The second ordinance this evening is related to amending the Broomfield Marijuana Licensing Code to permit the sale of prepackaged food and beverages at retail marijuana establishments consistent with state law. That was discussed previously, both during a request for future action by the mayor and at the last meeting regarding the fact that state law now allows a percentage of sales to be non-marijuana infused food and beverage. Local law needs to be amended to allow that, and that's what this ordinance would do. That does conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you again for your concise presentation. Although you had two ordinances, I still think you took less than double the time, so I appreciate that. We will now proceed with public comments. If there is anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no public comments, questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions? Councilmember Henkel.
So between April 1st and today, has there been any marijuana cultivation or marijuana product manufacturing in Broomfield? I just want to be sure.
Thank you, Councilmember. With that moratorium, it prohibited those uses and we did not receive any inquiries during the week lapse.
Okay, hopefully no one had a little fun during the week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, there being no more further questions, the public hearing is closed. First is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2266. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2266 to amend the Broomfield Municipal Code, Title 17, to make permanent the prohibition on marijuana cultivation and manufacturing facilities and add retail marijuana stores as a permitted use.
Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on second and final reading in order published by title? Councilmember Henkel.
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Delgadillo.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we will move forward on the vote on ordinance number 2266. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that passes unanimously. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2267. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2267, amending the Broomfield Municipal Code to permit the sale of non-marijuana consumable food and drink at marijuana establishments.
Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on second and final reading and order it published by title? Councilmember Wynn?
I make this motion.
Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we will now move forward with the vote on ordinance number 2267. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that passes unanimously. All right, next under action items this evening is council's consideration of an ordinance on first reading related to a business incentive agreement with Restaurant Depot LLC. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
We're just moving right along tonight. Mr. Jeff Schreier, he's our Economic Development Manager, is going to walk us through this item. Mr. Schreier.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So if you want to, I'm going to just give an overview of Restaurant Depot and also the proposed agreement. So if we could move to second, perfect. Thank you. So Restaurant Depot, they're a wholesale food supplier that supplies independent food businesses and restaurants. They've been open since 1990. They currently operate about 161 stores across the United States, and they're slated to construct a 54,000 square foot store here in Broomfield with a capital investment of $5 million. This store, as noted in the memo, is west of Main between 112th and 113th Avenues. The location will employ at least 50 workers with an intent to grow and expand their operations as time goes on. The average wage is estimated to be above $19 an hour. The net positive fiscal benefit is what I'll talk about next. So over the next 5 years, based on revenue estimates from Restaurant Depot given to staff, we estimate the net positive fiscal benefit to be $11.4 million. 9.4 million of those dollars are estimated to be generated via sales tax and use tax. Next slide, please. So now on to the agreement structure itself. The proposed agreement is to provide a maximum reimbursement of $1.1 million over 5 years to support their move to Broomfield. The terms of the incentive are twofold. First is a partial rebate of 50% of the company's payment made to the general fund portion of Broomfield's use tax with a maximum of $195,000, just a little over $195,000. The next piece is a partial rebate of 20% of the company's payment made for the general fund portion of Broomfield sales taxes remitted by the company up to just shy of $905,000. The proposed site, something to note here that's different than some, is that the proposed site is within the original Broomfield urban renewal area. And a portion of the sales and use tax revenues generated in this area have been previously pledged to support the broader Inner Park development. The 2017 Inner Park redevelopment agreement called for $1.8 million in funding via sales and use tax payments, with $1 million still due. The proposed business and the sales that they'll generate greatly increase the sales tax revenues, resulting in a payoff of that support under the 2017 agreement within 1 to 2 years is what staff estimates. Combining the proposed business support and the remaining payment balance on the Inner Park agreement, the total support for the area and the business would total $2.1 million. With that said, the estimated total tax revenues of $11.4 million and the proposed and outstanding obligations of $2.1 million, this proposed business and activity would result in a 5.4 to 1 investment return for the city and county of Broomfield, or 72% of the generated revenue. And just as a reminder, as with all of our agreements, they are performance-based. So in order for them to reach that $1.1 million, they need to generate enough sales and use tax to reach that within the 5 years. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. We will now proceed with public comments. If anyone would like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Sandy Anderson, the Broadlands. If you've never been to one, they're phenomenal. My eldest daughter is a Julia Child Scholar, Boston University, master's degree, blah, blah, blah. She took me in once. Oh my God, it is like the absolute best food place ever. So sorry that I don't have any comments about all the analysis, but really guys, this place is phenomenal. And if we get one, I'll have another cocktail party and the appetizer pairings that my daughter does. And it will cost me a small fortune, but you guys will love it.
All right, is there any other public comments? Seeing none, questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item are later. Are there any questions? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just one question, actually.
Yes.
Is this development dependent? Is this something that's already going forward, or is this something that's dependent on this incentive agreement?
My understanding is that it's dependent.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Cohen.
Yeah, I just had one philosophical question. I'm just curious how we approach this. If the average wage is $19 an hour, I assume a substantial number of these are minimum wage positions.
Yes.
How do we calculate that in terms of the value? That if we're generating revenue for the city, but we're not generating jobs that people can live on or live in Broomfield. So I'm just curious on the philosophical approach of trying to get higher wage jobs into the community.
Well, Jeff Romine's always the philosopher on these sorts of
You want to phone a friend, we can.
You know, but I think it's important to remember that, you know, we need a span of jobs for folks at differing skill levels. I mean, that's something that's important as well. And while there may be some, you know, more minimum wage type jobs, there are probably manager, assistant manager positions here as well. So there is a span of incomes at the location, but I think that's how I would maybe approach it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2257. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2257, approving a business incentive agreement with Restaurant Depot LLC.
Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading and order published in full? Councilmember Nguyen.
I make this motion.
Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will move forward with the vote on ordinance number 2257. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote, and the results will now be displayed on the screen. And that passes. Oh, Councilmember Cohen, we need your vote. When I said all, I meant everybody but. There we go. All council members have entered their votes, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. The final item under action items this evening is council's consideration of ordinance on first reading related to off-street parking and bicycle code. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Mark Ambrosi is already down there as I'm starting to read this, Principal Transportation Planner. Mr. Ambrosi.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Mark Ambrosi. I'm Principal Transportation Planner for the City and County of Broomfield. Thank you for inviting staff to join council tonight to review proposed code changes regarding the parking code arising from council direction from the June 18th, 2024 study session. Next slide, please. At the study session, council provided staff direction to address a few areas of the parking code. These include adding a new parking reduction area along the 120th corridor between Upham and Lowell Boulevard, eliminating minimum parking requirements for land uses identified as eligible for parking code reductions in the existing code, reviewing and proposing strengthened requirements for short-term bicycle parking, and ensuring bicycle parking design guidelines include specific direction for the accommodation of cargo bicycles and other alternative types of bicycles. The following slides outline proposed updates to the parking code to address council direction and will relate information about how these changes naturally result in substantial congruence with recent state legislation impacting parking. Next slide, please. The changes proposed in this ordinance add a new parking reduction area along 120th Avenue as directed by City Council. A draft geography for this area was discussed at the June 18th, 2024 study session. Staff proposes that some additional changes to the geography are made to encompass areas in Broomfield identified by the Department of Local Affairs to meet the requirements of House Bill 24-1304. The changes being proposed can be seen in the two maps on the screen. The top map illustrates what was shared during the study session, and the bottom map shows updated proposed geography. The map being proposed today adds some additional area along Main Street south of 120th Avenue and follows the Broomfield municipal boundary along Main Street and 112th Avenue. This terminates on the western side along the BNSF Railroad. Staff finds these changes to be minor, likely having limited impact on new development within the additional geography. Staff believes these changes are prudent and they will advance Broomfield development goals around the future Broomfield Rail Station and support future Front Range passenger rail and future Northwest Rail. Further, this area is largely built out, so this limits opportunities for major land use changes over the short term. Next slide, please. Additional changes are also proposed to two of the existing parking reduction areas to promote alignment with the state legislation. These changes are very minor and will have little to no impact on development in Broomfield. The Broomfield Station PRA, shown on the top, is proposed to be expanded to cover an area west of Wadsworth Parkway and southeast of the Rocky Mountain Airport. And in the Flatiron PRA, a very small amount of undevelopable land is being added to address the DOLA map. This addition will have no impact on development in Broomfield because the land is essentially undevelopable. Most of it is in conservation or in US 36 right of way. Next slide, please. So in summary, staff proposes adding 120th Avenue parking reduction area at the direction of City Council. We propose minor changes to the geography from the draft 120th parking reduction area to ensure it encompasses all of the areas defined by DOLA as necessary to meet House Bill 24-1304 requirements. Additionally, the geographies of the Broomfield Station and Flatiron Station parking reduction areas are proposed to be slightly modified. So once again, they would include the areas defined by House Bill 24-1304. These changes in geography are supported by staff due to the limited impact we anticipate on development. Council also directed staff to eliminate parking minimums in parking reduction areas for land uses deemed to be eligible for parking reductions. The combination of these efforts will result in Broomfield being in alignment with provisions of House Bill 24-1304. I also want to note that no changes are being proposed to the geography of the Colorado 7 parking reduction area, so that's going to remain the same. But we are proposing to eliminate parking minimums in that area as well as directed by council. Next slide, please. So other major changes proposed for the parking code is aimed at addressing council direction to review and suggest strengthened short-term bicycle parking requirements. Staff conducted a review of numerous regional municipalities, as well as a number of national municipal examples from areas with bicycle parking requirements. It became immediately apparent that not all communities address bicycle parking in their codes. It's also worth mentioning that municipalities with bicycle parking requirements, only of the municipalities with bicycle parking requirements, only a few had short and long-term bicycle parking requirements. Most of these were just blanket bicycle parking. So Broomfield does remain kind of ahead of the curve with many of our peer communities in the area. Next slide, please. In staff's review of municipal codes, we were seeking information about a few specific things. First, staff wanted to know if there were common strategies used by municipalities for regulating bicycle parking requirements. Second, we were curious about the consistency between municipalities for use cases. So for example, do multi-unit developments use the same strategies or are they using different strategies to regulate bicycle parking? Third, we wanted to understand the typical intensities of the requirements by the land use type. And by this, I mean, are we talking about 1 space per unit, or are we talking about 5 spaces per unit, or 1 space for 5 units? What we found was that there are common sets of strategies, and they fell into a few buckets. These approaches included using the percentage of total motor vehicle parking spaces, ratios of units or beds or gross floor area, or other ratios kind of along those lines. We also found that the strategies being used are not 100% consistent between communities for specific land uses. So different communities use different strategies. The intensity of requirements also fell into ranges, or often crafted to meet the specific needs of the community. This provides staff with a starting point for determining the appropriate number of short-term bicycle parking spaces to ask for certain land uses. But I just want to be clear that in Broomfield, we do have to consider that we have long-term bicycle parking requirements for some land uses. So we wanted to be cognizant of if the land use had long-term bicycle parking requirements, and if so, we want to be thoughtful about the strength of that short-term bicycle parking requirement so we don't create any sort of undue burden on development. Next slide, please. The staff are proposing seeks to accomplish a few things. We want to have a balance between short and long-term requirements. We want to use strategies that are as simple and consistent as possible. And we want to make sure the requirements are the right fit for Broomfield. What's being shown here on the slide attempts to strike the balance. For multi-unit residential development, staff proposes using a ratio of the number of units as a metric. The strength of this requirement falls in kind of the middle of the spectrum of what other communities are doing, and is tempered slightly because we do have a pretty robust long-term bicycle parking requirement for multi-unit residential development. For industrial uses like flex space or warehouses, and for commercial retail uses, staff are proposing to use a percentage of the total motor vehicle parking requirement. Staff suggests using 5% of the total vehicle parking spaces. This again was pretty typical based on some of the other examples we reviewed. For office, staff would be proposing to use 10% of the proposed vehicle parking. This is also I just want to note this use also has a requirement for long-term bicycle parking. Again, this is pretty typical of what we were seeing from other communities. For restaurants, we propose using the number of seats, and for lodging, we think the number of beds is the appropriate measure. Next slide, please. As we were putting together the parking code, staff identified that currently we don't require any guest or visitor parking for residential development. So this is an area that wasn't at the direction of City Council, but it was an oversight in the code, and it's something that's been coming up a little bit more recently. We have seen a few recent developments being proposed with no on-street parking and without adequate driveway space for off-street parking, so it felt prudent to address this with the update. Staff reviewed 10 local municipal codes, and all the codes reviewed had some provision for guest and visitor parking. Typical requirements from other municipalities for guest and visitor parking ranged between 1 for every 3 dwelling units and 1 for every 10 dwelling units. In this proposed code update, we're proposing 1 for every 8 dwelling units. In addition, these changes are proposed to only impact residential uses located outside of parking reduction areas, so this wouldn't be within parking reduction areas. The requirements would also only apply in developments that don't have on-street parking and have limited driveway space so that you can park in the driveway. I just want to note that up to this point, developments that would meet these conditions have opted to provide guest and visitor parking. The addition of this requirement is basically just formalizing something that's already happening in the community. I also want to note that Broomfield staff have added language to the design requirements for bicycle parking to indicate that they must accommodate cargo bikes. Next slide, please. So this parking code update also addresses the parking element of House Bill 241152, which is aimed at increasing the availability of accessory dwelling units in Colorado. The bill eliminates parking minimums associated with ADUs. and includes 2 exceptions for when there is no off-street parking available, like a driveway or garage, and when there's no on-street parking nearby. The exceptions were included in the bill to avoid illegal parking on the street that could impede emergency response, like preventing North Metro Fire District from reaching a house that's on fire. Staff have retained these exceptions in the proposed code due to their health and safety impacts, but staff suspect they will have the exceptions will have very limited use overall in Broomfield. Next slide, please. Finally, staff are making technical edits to the code to clarify requirements from House Bill 23-1233 that discusses requirements for electric vehicle charging. This bill essentially supplements the requirements from the Colorado Model Electric Ready and Solar Code that Broomfield adopted with Ordinance 2216. The measures being proposed in this ordinance include that EV charging spaces must count towards parking requirements. This is something we already do. This is just clarifying this in our code. That one of the EV charging spaces in a new development must be striped to meet van accessible parking space design requirements. So one of the EV chargers needs to have a bigger parking space. And that this van accessible parking space does not need to be reserved for a person with a disability. And if it is not reserved for a person with a disability, it must be counted as 2 or more standard parking spaces. So that's what some kind of small changes to the code that just clarify something that we're already starting to do in Broomfield. Next slide, please. In summation, if approved, the proposed ordinance number 2268 will create a new parking reduction area on the 120th Avenue, expand other parking reduction areas to include the areas identified by DOLA to meet House Bill 24-1304 requirements, eliminate parking minimums for eligible land uses within parking reduction areas, update short-term bicycle parking requirements for most land uses, ensure design requirements for bicycle parking include provisions to accommodate cargo bikes, and add visitor and guest parking requirements for residential uses in areas with parking constraints, and add language requiring that EV charging stations include 1 van accessible parking space. And that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot in this ordinance, a lot in this memo, so thank you for covering all of that. I know that this ordinance really encompasses a lot of discussions, a lot of years of local and state conversations, and so especially thank you to staff for your work on this, especially Mark Ambrosi and Sarah Grant. Thank you for all of your effort to get this in here. So next we will proceed with public comments. If there is anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no public comments, questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions? Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you very much, staff, for doing this. I know I've been harping on this since I got on council, and I'll probably continue to harp on it until I get off council. My first question is, when you were looking at the bike parking requirements, you mentioned there were a number of communities outside of Colorado, like Spokane and San Luis Obispo. Did any of the communities that you looked at in their code provide a mechanism for gradual increases over time as the adoption of biking as an alternative to driving for any situation occur? And then did you also look at any kind of requirements that outside countries may use? Obviously, like the Danish government or Danish country, they have Denmark. That was the word I was looking for. Denmark. It was escaping my mind. They have much more robust bike or just bike culture there, and that's something they've had to build towards since the 70s. So it was not something that they've always had. But did you look at any outside of the United States in terms of their codes and kind of how they scaled those requirements up over time?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Ward. To start out, I will start with the end of the question. Did we look at other examples from other countries? Not specifically, is how I'll answer that. Some of the guidance that we drew from to put this code together did utilize that. So the Association for Pedestrian and Bicycle Planners, some of the other guidance that we were leaning on drew from all over international sources, national sources, but we did not specifically review Belgian or Danish or other kind of leaders in the bicycling field. And then regarding, please remind me of the first part of the question again.
Yeah, the first part of the question was in the ones that the codes that you did look at, did they provide a mechanism in which there were either automatic increases or requirements for staff to go back and look at codes as the adoption of biking as a alternative to driving became more prevalent?
That's a great question. In the review that I did, none of the codes had a provision or requirement for kind of a feedback loop or follow-up. With that said, I think that a transportation demand management program that would be a great addition to something like that, and something that we could look at in the future to offset parking requirements or to strengthen the short-term bicycle parking like you're talking about. But none of the codes that I reviewed had any mention of that sort of kind of follow-up.
Okay. Can you walk me through how that transportation demand management plan would kind of be implemented in this code, for example, and how that would benefit?
Transportation demand management is an approach to, I guess it's somewhat straightforward, managing the times that cars are on the road and congestion. So it incentivizes developments, businesses, government to provide alternative options, which come in a wide range of flavors, ranging from flex schedules to work from home, and then also promoting, alternative modes of transportation. And so I think in guidelines that Broomfield could adopt that support transportation demand management measures, these would be a kind of set of additional requirements on development that were either required or incentivized in some way, and could be applied. Like there could be some sorts of, accelerated or less expensive development proposals or something like that, like reducing fees for something if they also agree to enhance their bicycle parking availability over time or something to that effect. The specifics of it are somewhat detailed and difficult to get into without having a lot more information in front of me, but there are a lot of strategies out there, and regionally we've been working on those over the last couple of years.
Okay. I know I have far more questions about transportation demand management plans, but I won't go into them right now because that's not really what's before us. But besides that, moving over to the cargo bike requirements that I know I had asked for, did we in the code reference anything specific as to dimensions? I know in the previous year and a half when this was last before us, I think, there was a link to some association for bikes that kind of laid out guidance as to dimensions for spaces and distances between racks and so on and so forth. Did we give guidance in terms of what size of cargo bike, or are we just saying cargo bike just to put it in there?
The ordinance continues to make reference to the APBP bicycle parking guidelines, which we have been using in Broomfield for a number of years, and it's one of the leaders on best practices in bicycle parking and bicycle use in the United States. Those guidelines do include thorough information about siting, location, design of bicycle parking, and it includes dimensions about all different types of bicycles and what is needed to accommodate different types of bicycles. And so we have not pulled that from the document and put it directly into the ordinance. We are referencing it still, and that it is a requirement that they're meeting those guidelines.
Okay, so when a development application comes before the city and county staff, are they then looking at what they're proposing in terms of bike parking, specifically dimensions for like cargo bikes, and going back to the I think you said APBP?
APBP, yep.
And making sure that that's correct, or are we relying on good faith that they're actually doing that?
From my own experience, most of the development reviews that we've had come through have a requirement for one short-term bicycle parking rack. And so the spacing in those is pretty straightforward. I think with these strengthened requirements, we're going to see more bicycle parking with multiple racks that we will need to go back and take a look and make sure that those design guidelines are being met. But to this point, we haven't run into that situation where we need to be evaluating the dimensions of the bicycle rack spacing. With that said, with some of the long-term bicycle parking requirements, we have specifically required developers to go back and redesign the layouts of their bicycle parking rooms and the storage areas to ensure that they can fit like a full-size cargo bike in there.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Councilmember Lim.
Thank you for answering my questions earlier today. Let's see, on the one question where we had multifamily buildings that could have resulted in less than 2 bicycle parking spaces. Staff did support that change in the ordinance. So I will bring that forward as an amendment. On the question, okay, the question that I asked about where it seemed to me that the bicycle requirements did not take into account the possibility that the development would have been in the parking reduction area, the PRA. That your response was to change the wording of in the percentage clause and call it a scrivener's error. So the change in the wording did not make any sense to me. So if you could explain that, that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you for the questions beforehand, and yeah, thank you for this opportunity to describe the change that we're proposing. So the original statement for a number of types of land uses that we went through and when we were discussing bicycle parking, and these are for industrial uses, office uses, and commercial retail uses, was using a percentage of the total required is how it was worded in the ordinance, motor vehicle off-street parking requirement, and a minimum of 2 spaces at primary building entrances. The issue with using required in this situation is if the use is in a parking reduction area and it's an eligible land use, that requirement would be effectively 0. Proposed, which is the word that we're proposing to change it to, when we receive a site plan development application, they will typically propose a number of parking spaces that they think is appropriate for their development. In Broomfield, including in parking reduction areas where we currently allow a 20% reduction below our minimum requirement for parking. We have seen 100% of developers asking for more parking than we allow and not less parking than we're permitting. So we're confident that developers are going to continue to propose some number of parking spaces along with their development, even though the requirement may be 0. We've changed the word "to proposed" to base the number of off-street or short-term bicycle parking spaces that they need to provide based on their proposed number of parking and not that required number of parking. So that's the change. It is somewhat subtle, but we think that it will adequately address the need for short-term bicycle parking.
The word, and maybe it's just my interpretation of the word proposed, the word proposed to me in a table of what is required by a developer says that whatever the developer is proposing is okay with us. And this is a table that is supposed to show the developer our requirements as a city. So why are we relying on what the developer is proposing to present the requirement?
Because that is a good question. I believe we can use a different metric than the percentage of total motor vehicle requirement for parking as our metric. If we want to use that, we could use gross floor area or some different metric and be more firm about what that would be.
I mean, I was just looking, if you want to keep the percentages, I wasn't absolutely, opposed to the percentage idea. I was opposed to what you're taking the percentage of. It's not clear to me if you're taking the percentage of what the developer is proposing for their parking, then we're dependent on what the developer wants. And I appreciate that you're saying the developers usually recognizes what our requirements are, but it's kind of backwards to think that, to me, that you're writing in a table that our requirement is depending on a developer's proposal.
Councilmember Lim, your point is well taken. I mean, we're over here. Your point is well taken, and it's understandable. Mark, perhaps walking through, so how does it correlate when you're having these conversations, which are numerous and difficult, because I get the calls after the developers meet with you about how unfair and awful it is. How does that translate? So if you have an outside person, not necessarily a developer or somebody that's well-schooled, but how does it translate the conversations that you have in that room with the developer to say, this is where we are, this is what we expect? How do you translate that so that it's clear? How can we translate that so that it's really clear on that chart that these are levels of expectations and not, why don't you go ahead and fill in the blank and then we'll have a follow-up conversation. So more of that front end of why I get the calls. Why I get the calls isn't being reflected on that chart. Does that make sense?
Yes, I believe so. I don't know that I have a great answer for how to go about this. The challenge of the table is to have a one-size-fits-all situation. We see developments I'm thinking of up in the baseline area, all different sizes. And so we have the Amazon distribution center, and then we also have a pad site, for a small business or something like that in Highlands or Palisades. And so it would need to fit both of those situations. Typically, my experience has been developers are going to propose the amount of parking that they need or their financiers need to see to give them the loan to create the development. And that's, I think, where you've been receiving some pushback is we aren't allowing enough parking to satisfy some of the development.
I think it's, Mark, I think it's how we articulate it
Yeah.
so that it's not completely passive on the front end. So that there will be additional conversations on a case-by-case basis. And that's a stretch. I don't mean to say case-by-case basis, but yeah, Councilmember Lim, your point is well taken. Let us, I don't think we can solve it tonight, but I hear you.
I mean, is it as simple as, it depends what we want. I mean, is it as simple as saying that we want the bike spaces to equal 5% of what would be the non-PRA calculation, you know, the non-PRA number of parking spaces?
I think that would be an elegant way to solve this.
I mean,
I
that's
think that's
a larger number,
Yeah.
but I mean, so that means even if you're in the PRA or not, we want you to have 5% of that non-PRA number.
Yeah, that's an easy change that we can make.
If that works. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just have a couple of nitpicky questions, just reacting to the document. And maybe Councilmember Ward can answer better, but cargo bikes, I confess I've never seen one. They're what I've noticed online, $4,000 bikes, often electric. Do people park those outside and walk away? I mean, think the security of a bike of that price and of that nature, people, one, it could fit in the car stall. And two, because it's supposedly intended to replace a car, you use the cargo bike instead of having a car. But I'm wondering if people trust to leave that in a bike rack.
I can answer based on personal experience. And actually, you see them much more frequently currently up in like City of Boulder. Yes, people bring them often to go shopping, often to drop their kids off at school, and then, you know, go shopping or do yoga or something like that. And so I have seen them outside tethered, you know, securely to bicycle parking racks. The point is taken that they are very expensive bikes, and
But you would typically see them at a grocery store or a school, not regular businesses necessarily. But I just don't want to be onerous for something that maybe is extremely rare, but or could use a car stall rather than having a specific requirement for something that's sort of a cross between. The other question I had was related to value. I was struck that there was a requirement for lodging. I can't imagine either biking to a hotel or arriving with a car with a hotel bike on the back and leaving it outside. I would never do that myself. I wouldn't advise anybody to do that. It can disappear in 3 seconds. So one, are we encouraging more bike thefts? Or is it necessary for a hotel to have bike racks when I don't think anybody would advise anyone to leave a bike overnight outside, especially in a place, a hotel where you just know they're targeting?
yeah, I think the use case in that situation could be staff, and it could also be people attending a conference or something like that, being up there for the day, riding your bike down from, or, you know, from somewhere in Broomfield and then parking over at one of the hotels in Interlochen for a few workshops or something like that. Yeah, I agree that it's probably unlikely that people would be, or, you know, staying at the hotel for a week would be parking their bicycle outside or even bring a bicycle due to the security concerns of long-term bicycle parking.
But when you were doing your survey, you found these other cities that you were looking at had this requirements.
Yeah, most communities did have specific requirements for hotels, conference centers, lodging in general.
Okay, I'm just being a dad, I guess, but my son's about to take a long trip with a bike on the back and trying to figure out how does he stop to go to the bathroom and keep an eye on that bike. And it's a hard question if you're traveling alone. But anyway, thank you for your answers. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
So I have a question related to the transition to the new code and the dates there. There's a note in the staff memo that staff has been communicating this information to developers with active development. Did we get any response back from anyone with developer with current development, especially probably along the baseline area? Was there any concern from any developers that this would cause trouble with their development underway? I think.
We did, so we reached out specifically to all the developers that are frequent flyers in Broomfield, provided them with an email inviting them to contact me personally to set up a face-to-face meeting or to submit comments on the Broomfield Voice page that we had. We did receive one request for a meeting, and that those were the Broomfield Town Square developers. Their concerns were related to the applicability of these code requirements to their development. And because they have a PUD that establishes parking requirements, the only things that they would need to be aware of are kind of the electric vehicle related requirements. And we asked them to consider the bicycle park requirements. But generally, it wasn't going to have a major impact on them. And we actually did not hear from any other developers with concerns about these requirements.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you. That is all.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2268. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2268 to amend the Broomfield Municipal Code Title 17-32 accessory buildings and uses to revise the regulations for off-street and bike parking.
Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading and order published in full? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Delgadillo.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Lim.
Okay, I do have one amendment. Staff seems to have direction on the what we were talking about with the proposed language. So that seems clear. I do have one amendment for the multi-unit buildings. So that would be the way I worded it was in Broomfield Municipal Code 1732-130B, bicycle parking required spaces. The table should be amended for land use types, multi-unit and senior multi-unit developments to add and a minimum of 2 spaces at primary building entrances to the short-term bike parking requirement. Great.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim has made a motion for an amendment. The amendment is on the screen. Is there a second for this motion? Councilmember Ward.
I'll second the amendment.
Is there any discussion on this amendment? Seeing no discussion, council, please cast your vote electronically for the amendment. All council members have entered their vote for the amendment. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that amendment passes unanimously. We will return to the discussion of the ordinance. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Again, I do want to thank staff for all the work they've done over the past, well, almost 4 years since I first brought up this issue. Boy, I can't believe it's been that long. And while I appreciate that we brought this back and we did make the changes to that parking reduction areas along 120th and was actually much more than what I had envisioned when I first proposed it, I do really appreciate that work. I do think that there still is more work that can be done with bike parking to get us more towards a culture that uses and expects to see bike parking when they go places. I know the frustration when I bike around town and I go to places for meetings and there's no place to lock up my bike. For example, at the Omni, I have to lock it up to a bench because there's no bike parking there. Or if I go over to the shopping center that's off of Nickel Street, I have to lock it up to a pole because there's no, that's the sign for the ADA van space because there's no bike parking there. And so we have a lot of work to get us to the point where I think work is done, but I do appreciate the work that staff has been doing. And during second reading, I will be proposing an amendment that requires that this particular part of the code be looked at roughly every 5 years or so, just to make sure we are continuously updating this part of the code as time goes on. But other than that, I will be voting for the
Excellent.
this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Anderson.
So I do have a question. If Councilmember Ward proposes on the second reading, does that automatically require us to have a third reading? Or is there a way to just introduce, I mean, I would love to hear staff's response to that. Like, is there a way to avoid, or is that minimal enough that we wouldn't need the third reading?
So there's a couple options. Councilmember Ward could introduce the amendment tonight. We would need that supermajority to introduce it and council could vote on it tonight. If that happened, then there wouldn't be a need for a third reading. If Councilmember Ward or any council member introduced an amendment on second reading and it was passed, that would necessitate a third reading. So I think that was me said, you can try option number one. It does not preclude option number two.
Councilmember Ward, would you like to introduce an amendment?
Sure, I was planning on doing it during second reading, but why not? We'll give it a try tonight. Yes, I will propose that we amend ordinance number 2268 to require that staff revisit bike parking requirements in the city and county of Broomfield every 5 years.
And Attorney Rogers, is that a proper motion? And staff, is that amendment clear and needing any further description?
Clear.
Perfect. Councilmember Ward has made a motion for an amendment. Is there a second? Councilmember Delgadillo.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this amendment? Councilmember Marshallson.
Do we have to vote first that he can introduce the amendment?
Yes. Any other discussion at this point? All right, we will have a vote to introduce the amendment. Again, this amendment needs 2/3 of the present council in order to be introduced. So council, please, can we vote on this or should we do a hand raise on the introduce? Perfect. We are going to vote by hand, show of hands for the introduction of this amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that looks like it's unanimous. So thank you. So the amendment has been introduced. And so now we will vote on this amendment. Last call for any discussion on this amendment. Seeing none, council members, please cast your vote electronically on the amendment. Councilmember Henkel. Thank you. All council members have entered their vote and that amendment passes unanimously. Thank you for saving us time on the second reading. We will now return to discussion on the ordinance. Is there any further discussion? And just a note, so staff, there was some conversation around the proposed bike discussion that Councilmember Lim was having. I think that this would be best handled as direction to staff as opposed to a separate amendment, since there's going to be some wording that will happen. I don't know if there's any objections for staff taking a second look at that language. Seeing no opposition, that staff direction, that would be great. So we will, so no further discussion. We will move forward with the vote on ordinance number 2268. Council, please cast your vote electronically. And all council members have entered their vote. The results will now be displayed on the screen and that passes unanimously. There are no requests for future action. Thank you, staff, for all of your work on this. And there are no future requests for action this evening. Is there any other business to come before council from my council colleagues or staff? Seeing none, as a reminder, there is a special council meeting this week on Thursday, April 10th at 6 p.m. And there is no further business tonight. So the business meeting for tonight is adjourned. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Thank you.